Item 10B, receive a report, waive the first reading, and introduce 2013 Fire and Building Code ordinances to be adopted by reference, set public hearing for adoption, and adopt a resolution approving findings of necessity and need for amendments, deletions, and additions to the codes.
Good evening, Honorable Mayor Ruane and members of the City Council. My name is David Woltering. I'm the city's Community Development Director. Tonight, staff from the Community Development Department and Fire Department will make a joint presentation to you recommending initiating action toward adopting the 2013 state-mandated California building codes with a number of proposed local amendments. Approximately every 3 years, the state of California updates its building and fire codes and mandates that cities and counties within the state adopt these codes. These codes apply minimum construction standards for all built structures throughout the state. The current 2013 California building codes have 12 parts, including the California Building Code, the California Fire Code, and the California Green Building Standards Codes. The prior building codes adoption cycle was referenced as the 2010 California Building Code cycle. All projects submitted on or before December 31st, 2013 must comply with this previous adopted 2010 cycle. All projects submitted as of January 1, 2014 must comply with the state-mandated 2013 codes, which we will be discussing this evening. Cities and counties can adopt amendments to the state-mandated California building codes to address unique climatic, geographical, and topographical conditions. During the prior 2010 California Building Code cycle, the City of San Bruno did adopt a number of local amendments. The Community Development Department's Building Division is recommending generally that those local amendments be carried forward with the current 2013 code adoption cycle. Staff is not proposing any new local amendments to the building codes with this cycle. However, staff is proposing several local amendments to the fire codes. In preparation for this current code adoption, staff has placed an announcement on the Community Development Department website with links to the 2013 codes and helpful resources to explain their implementation. Moving forward with tonight's joint presentation, the city's chief building official, Roy Bruno, will describe highlights of the state-mandated building codes as well as several proposed carryover local amendments. And then Deputy Fire Chief Dave Downing and Fire Battalion Chief Jim Allen will describe highlights of the proposed local amendments to the state-mandated fire codes. The action that staff will be recommending with this presentation is to waive first reading, introduce the 2013 Fire and Building Code ordinances attached to your staff report to be adopted by reference, set a public hearing date of February 11th, 2014 for adoption of those ordinances, and then adopt this evening the resolution also attached to your staff report approving findings of necessity and need for amendments, deletions, and additions to allow the proposed local amendments that will be described by staff later in this report. Now I would like to invite Chief Building Official Roy Bruno to provide highlights of the state-mandated building codes. Thank you.
Thank you, David. Honorable Mayor, City Council, it's my pleasure and it's my honor to be here tonight to present the 2013 code adoption. And I have a few items that I'd like to bring to your attention. Most of these are all adopted into the state code, but are of interest. The very first item here is there are some changes to the 2013 California Green Building Standards Code. If you recall, back in 2010, the mandatory measures of the Green Building Code, which went into effect in 2010, were directed at new construction. Now the mandatory measures apply to additions and alterations on residential and non-residential buildings. There are some thresholds that you'll cross for non-residential, and there's some basic lines that you'll have to follow for residential. Outside of that, one of the added items also under the new code adoption in the green building is Senate Bill 407, which is a Water Conservation Fixtures Act, which requires that when you modify or add or alter a building and it is in and you're having plumbing fixtures in that area, you'll be required, if they're non-compliant fixtures, to be upgraded to water-conserving fixtures. This only relates to properties that are built or that were constructed on or after January. It only applies to properties built on or before January 1, 1994. And there are some exceptions to that. And the items that are accepted are obviously repairs and replacements, because the three text items that the Senate bill requires is alterations, improvements, or additions. So anything outside of that would not be included in that Senate bill, or that requirement. Another item that we have to deal with is also along with the California Energy Code as it relates to the Green Building Code. Back in 2010, this council asked staff to bring forward some voluntary tier measures for green building. What has happened since that time, we did adopt the Tier 1 in 2010. What's happened after 2010 is that the California Energy Commission has come up with a new process by which local jurisdictions can bring forward REACH code items in green building. They require us to provide an analysis, a cost-benefits analysis, and there's a criteria by which they establish that. Unfortunately, right now, the CEC does not have that ready for us or any other city. So it's our recommendation that this code cycle, we don't bring forward an adoption for a REACH code item, Tier 1 or Tier 2, until such time when the CEC does have that criteria available for us to be able to review and see if we can make that work for the city. Another item here that's happened also in the Energy Code is that the improvements in the Energy Code in the lighting area is going to be substantial. It appears that it'll be 25% residential improvement lighting energy efficiency and 30% for non-residential. And those are built into the basic code. Those are adopted code items. So there are quite a few improvements above and beyond what was in 2010 that we'll have to talk about when we get the criteria for looking at any of the REACH codes, the Tier 1s or Tier 2 items. One other real important item that's happened in this code cycle, as you all know, is that the California Building Code, Chapter 11, has now merged with the ADA standards, which is the American Disabilities Act standards. For years, Title 24, California was a front runner in creating, accessibility standards for the disabled, and the federal government would lead behind or follow behind. Now what's happened is if you look in Chapter 11B, the federal standards and the state standards have merged. This will streamline the process for designers and create a lack of confusion, a less confusion out there for stakeholders and users of buildings. The whole movement was to try to reduce the lawsuits that were occurring out there for barriers to access to buildings. Those are the basic items of additions that have been brought to the code as adopted items. We have some other items that were brought in 2010. And those items in 2010, we're asking council to consider bringing them forward for the 2013. And as you can see up on those are the first three. One of them, of course, as you know, is related to protecting residential structures for air point noise impacts. The next item, of course, is amending the California Building Code to describe the responsibility of the building official to administer the code, which is really just basic language that covers us for those kind of decisions. Next section was amending the building code to describe penalties for violating the code. And outside of that, the next 4 items really were related to non-combustible materials and wildland urban interface areas. Amending the building code relating to minimum roof covering classification for all types of construction to be Class B. The code has changed in that area where there were only 2 sections where C roofs were allowed, so we're really only saying that in those 2 sections we're replacing that with a B. So the code is kind of coming up with our standard. It's actually catching up with the City of San Bruno. The next item is the amended residential code for reinforced design requirements. And of course, the last item is the residential code requiring or describing gypsum wallboard and plaster is not considered as braced wall panels. And those are the items that we would like to bring forward into the 2013 code.
At this point in the joint presentation, our next step would be to move forward and for the fire department staff to come forward and provide highlights of the proposed local amendments to the fire code. We could, though, at this point, if the council so directs, take any questions regarding the presentation thus far regarding the building code.
If I could, for clarity, the energy code revisions will not take place until July 1st?
That is correct.
Okay, but all others, the green building and everything?
Correct. Any items that aren't attached to the energy code go into effect January 1.
Okay.
Thank you.
Good evening, Honorable Mayor, Council members. Most of the proposed 2013 Fire Code adoption is a inclusion of previously adopted language or changes to code section numberings that clean up the ordinance. The local amendments that are being proposed to help both firefighters responding to emergencies and increase life safety of citizens within the community. There are 6 amendments that we'll be discussing that deal with a variety of fire safety issues. The most important issue deals with new residential retrofit sprinkler requirement. Currently, the fire code mandates sprinklers in all new residential construction. What is being proposed is a retrofit sprinkler requirement that is triggered by a percentage threshold dealing with alterations, remodels, or additions to 1- and 2-family properties. Why are we doing this? Because we feel that fire sprinklers save lives. Some of the important facts that demonstrate the efficiency and effectiveness of fire sprinklers is that industry standards show that installing a sprinkler system installing a sprinkler system into a residence increases survival rate in a fire by 97%. Modern fire sprinkler systems are proven to be reliable, as statistics show an accidental discharge rate of less than 1 in 16 million sprinkler heads that are currently in service. And residential fire sprinkler statistics also show that 90% of all sprinkler activations involve only 1 to 2 sprinkler heads being discharged during an active fire. At this time, I'll turn it over to Fire Marshal Jim Allen, who will discuss the details of the amendments that are being proposed.
Good evening, Honorable Mayor and City Council. This evening, as mentioned by Chief Downing, the Fire Department is bringing forth for your consideration our staff recommendation for 6 newly proposed local amendments to the Fire Code. The first recommendation is to modify our previously adopted definition section to include the term sky lantern. These are balloon type unmanned devices with fuel source, typically a candle or sterno type of material, which are released untethered into the sky during certain cultural ceremonies. We are also asking that the use of these devices be prohibited within the city. Staff is also bringing forth a proposal for new building addressing requirements to assist with identification of buildings during emergencies, specifically rules pertaining to the local location and size of numbering. Requirements would involve number size based upon distance from the street. These requirements parallel language typically used now as project conditions and would not be retroactive to existing properties not being modified by change, business, or construction. Our next staff recommendation is the adoption of language regarding key boxes, or Knox boxes as they're better known in the industry, for granting fire personnel access to commercial properties during emergencies. Once again, we currently provide similar requirements as project conditions. Also proposed is requiring fire command rooms in new buildings to be constructed with at least one exterior door for firefighter safety. Staff is also proposing that new elevators be installed without shunt trips, which are electrical devices. This would prevent the potential shutdown of elevators during firefighter operations, and has been added as a fire comment to San Bruno's construction projects for many years. The language would correct potential fire sprinkler and fire alarm conflicts during building construction as a result. Perhaps the most significant local amendment being proposed by staff is the modification of the current San Bruno fire sprinkler retrofit ordinance. Regarding commercial properties, the existing San Bruno language is proposed to remain, with the exception of modification to the language that would grant the fire chief the ability to require the installation of a fire sprinkler system if a change in use or occupancy creates a more hazardous life fire safety condition in the space where the change in use or occupancy is proposed. The existing language requires the addition of fire sprinklers when improvements occur to an existing building over 7,500 square feet in gross floor area, and there is a permit for construction valued in excess of $30,000 in a one-year period. Regarding residential properties, which are 1 and 2 family dwellings, new language is proposed to require fire sprinklers related to retrofits in additions meeting a prescribed threshold. The language would require the retrofit of an entire existing 1 and 2 family dwelling with an automatic fire sprinkler system when additions, remodels, or alterations involve 70% or more of the existing or cumulative square footage of the entire new structure regardless of its size. It would also require sprinklers when alterations to buildings increase the size to more than 3,000 square feet and or involve buildings over 3 stories, or 33 feet in height to the sill plate. The 70% calculation would be inclusive of a 36-month window of work performed on the residence should construction projects be distributed over time. The remaining proposed modifications reflect existing adopted language and include the renumbering of pages and sections to coincide with current edition of the Fire Code.
Okay, Fire Marshal Allen has presented a lot of sort of technical terms that deal with basically the retrofit of the sprinkler ordinance and the commercial changes that give the option to the fire chief. What does this ordinance really mean? It means that for the most part, we align ourselves with some of the other agencies within the county. This is the same ordinance that has been adopted by Millbrae. And based upon my experience in Millbrae over the past 10 years, the properties that will be required to be sprinklers are basically resemble new construction. These homes are usually untenable. They're usually down to the studs. In my experience over the past 10 years, these houses are very comparable to new construction. Very rarely do you have somebody who's going to do a major construction to a property and not affect more than 70%. Usually if they're going to do 70%, they're going to do the whole house. So basically, we're aligning this particular ordinance to sprinkler a whole house that basically is incomparable to new construction. The other thing is we reviewed the tapes of the sprinkler ordinance proposal that was brought before the council back in 2007. We believe that we listened to the concerns and the issues that were proposed during that ordinance and addressed them with this new proposal. We believe that this is the best option moving forward that protects the lives of the citizens and also helps us align with neighboring agencies within San Mateo County. At this time, we'd be glad to answer any questions you may have regarding any part of the ordinance or what was presented in the report.
I know you mentioned specifically Millbrae, but since we're closely aligned with Central County, what's the deal in Hillsborough and Burlingame?
Actually, they have a more stringent sprinkler ordinance. Theirs is 50%. And pardon?
Yes, theirs is a little, when it comes to Burlingame's, it's 2,000 square foot with 750 foot addition for residential.
Mm-hmm.
So just to kind of follow up on that question, the vast majority of jurisdictions within San Mateo County have gone actually to a 50% rule for residential retrofit. For what it's worth, currently there are 16 of the 20 jurisdictions within San Mateo County that do have a residential fire fit spit it out, Jim. Okay, ordinance of some form or another. We're coming in with what we believe to be a relatively conservative approach because we understand that there is some concerns that the city brings forward with this. And basically, as Chief Downing was saying, we're patterning this off of Millbrae's adoption, and actually it's very similar to what was just recently approved in that jurisdiction, and has been the basis of their fire sprinkler retrofit ordinance for some time now. We chose the 70% numeral, and that's why I feel it would be appropriate in this city, is that we have a tendency to have a lot of smaller homes in this community. A 70% threshold is a quite large threshold, and as Chief Downing stated, typically when we've run across homes that that have met that 70% threshold, they're basically stripped homes. I mean, you could sort of picture these are homes that are not typically habited anymore. These are homes that the sheetrock has been ripped out. These are homes that have new wiring going in them, new electrical going on them. Anyway, we're simply requesting at this point, since the homes are actually opened up, that it's a good opportunity at this point to go ahead and add plastic fire sprinkler piping to these homes. We are not just, I just want to make a point that we're not going after, or our intent is not to destroy somebody's house simply because they're putting a small addition or onto their house, adding a bedroom, doing a kitchen remodel. We're not even attempting to go there. We're looking for big major projects. Basically, these are the projects that you would typically drive by, look at them and go, what were they thinking? Why didn't they just knock the whole thing down anyway? That's what we're really looking at here.
Okay. Anything else on sprinklers while we're on them? Ken? Rico? I mean,
I have the utmost respect for fire personnel, firefighters, but I'm against ordinances to impose on people that want to improve their homes. My question is, if it is, and I don't want to put dollar signs on lives, it is an economic issue. But my problem is that we're renewing a fire code. We're renewing how many codes? One of which is the 2013 fire code. Why isn't there stricter guidelines in the fire code?
The fire code, just for starters, when it comes to residential building, remember that the fire code is going to require that you put fire sprinklers in any new home right off the bat. So it leaves local municipalities the option to figure out how they're going to best deal with retrofit situations. Keep in mind that some cities, such as Hillsborough, have homes that are 4,000, 5,000, 6,000 square feet in size. You have homes here in this jurisdiction that are typically smaller, and it gives us the leeway to kind of direct what we feel is the best fit for our community here. As Chief Downing stated, the addition of fire sprinklers in a home take the life safety risk, and I know we're not talking numbers there specific, but fire sprinklers typically in a residential fire will give you a 50% chance of successfully getting out of a home. That number, as Dave stated, goes up to 97% with the addition of fire sprinklers in the home. So it's quite an increase in safety when it comes to adding this option into a home. I know dollars is an important factor, and I respect that, and that's why we're coming with such a large number to the table. And trust me, what we're not trying to do is take the average home where somebody has simply remodeled something and start breaking apart their sheetrock walls. That's not what we're after. We are truly targeting these homes that are basically gutted shells to begin with. These are homes that typically, as I stated, they're sheetrocked, removed, they're wooden stud homes. Their ceilings have already been pulled in these. These are shell homes. They've made major modifications to internal walls. We don't want to inconvenience our community by saying, look, we want you to start punching holes throughout your walls. That's not what we're here for. And I think this is why we're bringing this particular proposal forward for you. I know it's very different than what you've been given in the past, where it was simply an additional 500 square foot rule or whatever the case may be. In this particular situation, for example, you could have a 1,000 square foot home. If you don't alter the inside of the home, you could add another 1,000 square feet to this house and still not be impacted by this. Once again, this is very minimal impact that we're trying to put on the community here. It would only be when you exceed 70% of damage or remodel or renovation, I should say, to the existing home that this would even come into play. And as Chief Downing stated, and because once again, I take care of Millbrae as well, when I'm in those homes, they're very seldom at a 70% mark. It's very seldom that you have to make some kind of a judgment call. Typically, these homes are gutted. This is basically new construction that already has a roof on it at this point. And I mean, not to keep on beating here, but you're looking at about a 1% to 3% cost per square foot to do this. You're talking relatively, I look at the permits that are coming through. A typical residential home of this nature is going to run somewhere between $5,000 and $7,000 for retrofit when it's in this condition. So it's typical to an upgrade in flooring or an upgrade in counters at this point. It's not the major expense that you would typically find in a lot of these resolution requests, that they're ripping apart walls that are already pre-existing, which really drives the cost up.
My big question is, how many house fires have we had? Do we typically have each year? And how many of them are of new houses or large houses?
I've investigated fires approximately once every 6 to 8 weeks. I'm called in, including the fire that we just had on San Mateo Avenue, which I might add was stopped by fire sprinklers in the attic of that building. So it's typically the homes that we've investigated, or that I go out to investigate, because I also do our fire investigations. Most of the homes that we've had in the last several years have not been sprinklered buildings, sadly. It's unfortunate, because when we're talking about a dollar cost advantage, we use 20%, or I'm sorry, 20 times the amount of water once we have a fire that's actually in a residential building that's non-sprinklered than we would have had to use if there were indeed fire sprinklers at the time of the fire. However, the vast majority have been without fire sprinklers, which is what we're trying to change here. We're trying to slowly make a change and start bringing more and more homes, more and more families into a matter of safety at this point.
I just have a real concern with, you know, the staff report says, you know, and I can appreciate that you don't want to burden or have undue burdens on people improving their homes in various ways. You know, it is the big, you know, the big remodels or the gutted homes and the big additions and things. And you state in the staff report that that's only typically, you only foresee 5 to 10 homes
Yes.
per year.
That would be typical of what we had in Seattle.
So why are we targeting these 5 to 10 property owners? There are 100-year-old homes, 60, 70-year-old homes that will probably never get improved in this community. And I would assume they would be the bigger risk. Now we're talking about a 70% improvement. Homes are being, you know, whether or not they have sprinklers or not, they're better materials, and, you know, with green building, there's not a lot of combustible materials, you know, now, and so they're almost safer. They're almost safer than the older homes that have sprinklers. I could argue, but 5 to 10 homes, because, you know, I'm an architect, and I'm the one, whatever this council decides on, whatever town I work in, I'm the bearer of bad news. Some of them take it as bad news. Some of them take it as c'est la vie. That's what we have to do. But I just think, I mean, we're going to talk about something with, you know, with sewer laterals and point of sales, and as these things turn over, and it could take years and years to have a safe community. I've got practically a brand new home that's been improved, and next door I could have the biggest fire hazard, and across the street I could have the biggest fire hazard that will never reach the safety that my home has, you know, been improved.
Respectfully, I understand your point. I need to remind, however, that if that home were built from scratch, the state sees it fit to require that that building be fire sprinklered. That's above and beyond us because of the safety factor that would be involved with the new construction. Now, mind you, we're not going to catch every building. There's no perfect ordinance. And it would be not proactive, in my opinion, I'm sure with any of our staff's opinion, to go into that 100-year-old building, start ripping it apart to retrofit it with fire sprinklers. It's just not an opportune time to do it. And which is why we're coming forward with the proposal that we are coming forward with. We are targeting those homes that are nearly new construction. We're targeting the ones that we have the easy access, where plumbers are already pulling plastic through to modify plumbing, and electricians are pulling conduit through them to modify electrical. We can't catch them all, but if we, as we stated, catch 5 to 10 of them per year, that's 50 to 100 of them over the course of time as we start to reflect here, over 10 years. We're not going to catch them all. But every one we do catch makes the home safer, makes a family safer that's in that home.
Okay. My last question is that, being with Millbrae, it's my understanding that a 30-year-old ordinance where if you got a permit of very minimal value, that you would have to put a sprinkler in the garage, and that, correct me if I'm wrong, that was just rescinded.
Yes, it was. I rescinded that. Yeah. I do not believe in partial fire sprinkler systems, which is why I was not a real opponent to the previous fire proposals that have been brought to you. This is why we're going after a full retrofit for a building. I don't believe that, my personal feeling was that in the fires I investigated in Millbrae, which I had investigated garage fires last year, fire sprinklers that were non-professionally installed in the garage prevented a false sense of security to the homeowner. People thought that they had proper coverage in a situation where in reality, when the fire actually occurred, they did not. I went to a recent, within the last several months, I went to a property that had a 40-foot long garage and had a fire sprinkler on one on either side. Was not sufficient coverage for that that particular setting. However, the homeowner felt that it was they were well protected. I do not believe in half systems. I don't like doing that. If you're going to do it right, which is why we're coming with this approach now to fully retrofit at a large threshold.
Just for the history of that, is that was put in by the previous chief when the council had previously rescinded a retrofit sprinkler ordinance that had been adopted prior. They decided they wanted to do something, so they put a sprinkler in the garage. Like Jim said, this was giving people a false sense of security that they put a sprinkler in their garage. As you know, most garages have a huge fire load. With one sprinkler head in the garage, it really was almost like putting a garden hose on a thing. Wasn't a engineered system that would put out the fire.
If I may add if I may add one more thing. In addition to being a fire marshal, I'm a licensed General B class contractor. I'm allowed to build this building. I'm not allowed to do the fire sprinkler system in it. What Millbrae was requesting of those that pulled permits was to have somebody come in who is not a licensed sprinkler contractor and do a retrofit to their existing plumbing to put in something that I, as a licensed General B class contractor, am not allowed to do. That was another reason I wanted to pull it.
Any questions? Irene?
I have questions on another section of this. On E, you have fire command control rooms in new buildings are required to be constructed with at least one exterior door for firefighter safety. I have no idea what that is.
Yeah, right. Understood. The fire control room is a location in a commercial property where the main fire alarm control panel, where our panels are, where we have access to such things as ventilation systems, fire alarm systems, different capabilities. It's like in a major hotel, for example, Tanfran Mall is a prime example, and I'll use that as our example here. What we're doing is, and this, by the way, is something that was that's been brought upon by other jurisdictions as well in San Mateo County. We're fortunate to have the fire marshal from the city of Burlingame and Hillsborough here this evening, and this I know is something that they were working on too, adopting. The idea is that we want to have access, if there's a fire burning, to have a door that we can get out of in case things go really bad inside the building. A prime example, where this doesn't happen is, for example, Tanfran. Tanfran's fire command room is buried pretty deeply inside the building. We have to go through fire corridors to get to it, and we just want to have the ability that if something happens that we can get out of the building quickly.
Okay, and this is on new construction?
New construction only, yes.
Okay. And one more.
Yeah.
On the building addresses identification, I know it's not for older buildings that already exist, but we, Mr. Reichel, we had talked about it as a project that crime prevention could be doing. Is there a way with this, either with this ordinance or some method of encouraging people whose houses have either no lettering and no numbering? I was trying to find somebody yesterday. I could not find them at all. By Braille, I had to finally get to them. And I can imagine some firefighters or policemen who are not familiar with the area knowing, trying to find a specific house can't do it. And it would be a tragedy if something happened because of that.
That's exactly why we're doing this. We have, it's for emergency location. As proposed, up to 36 feet would be 4 inches in height. 36 to 50 feet would be 6 inches in height, and when you exceed 50 inches, you'd go to the 9-inch sizing. This is to give you a larger scale for this very purpose. This parallels what we currently request in project conditions for most projects that are new projects anyway. We're simply trying to come up with common language that is similar to other neighboring jurisdictions as well. It's we don't want to become too obtrusive with huge numbering, but at the same time we want the ability to be able to find a location.
Oh, absolutely. So this is for only new construction, though?
Correct.
Would it be for remodels as well?
Right. Yeah, let me correct that. It's for when there's a change. If you have a new business compliance inspection, for example, when we go out to do a business inspection for a new tenant, for example, on El Camino Real, typically at that point, that's when we have them upgrade the number sizing if they have not already done so. We don't retroactively go in and start picking people that have been in business for 15, 20 years. It's a change of occupancy, a change of business.
Okay. What I'm suggesting is we need to beef this up even more than what it is now. So maybe we could pass this and look next year at something stronger and more pervasive.
The building numbers on the cinema at Tan Fran are 36 inches tall, for example.
Yeah, that one's good.
So just to give you an idea, perspective, they look like they're about this tall when you sit down below, but I was part of that project. They are actually 3 feet tall numbers. So these are minimum standards.
Okay, so put it on a tickler somewhere that we look at something stronger next year.
If I might, it sounds like the council member and perhaps Citizens Crime Prevention Committee might be interested in looking at ways that we could disseminate information and encourage people what the standard is, and that they might, because their house is hard to find, or because they're interested in improving their safety, simply take that step to, it's a very relatively cheap item to add to a home, whether you're remodeling or not. So that may be an outreach and public education effort that we could undertake in the meantime before coming back with some beefed up requirements.
Okay, maybe as the building inspectors go out to inspect different things, they can
Great idea.
give them a
Encourage
handout
people.
that says, oh, by the way.
Yeah, I think David just told me that if a building is found to be non-addressed, code enforcement goes out and assures that they receive some sort of a warning, or that they have to put an address on their property.
But that's for commercial, or is that for anybody? I swear, it took me 5 houses to find the right place yesterday.
Having worked in
Residential, if you
fire
get a permit.
suppression up in Station 52's district in the fog, trust me, I understand how difficult it can be to find building addresses in the middle of the night.
David?
Pardon me. The code does require that all properties be properly addressed. So if we have a property that is not properly addressed, we should learn about that and send code enforcement officers out and make sure it's properly addressed. So
Okay.
what you find here in the proposed local amendment from the fire department has to do with increasing the size or adjusting the size. But in any case, properties must be properly addressed per current code.
And what is that? What does that mean, properly addressed?
Illuminated address, 4 inches high.
It's in the code, and there's specific dimensions and locations for being addressed. And so if we find that a property is not addressed, there's no address on the property, we would send out a code enforcement officer, review the code, and make sure that the property owner places the address on the property in a visible location, meeting code requirements.
Okay, and maybe we could work with crime prevention when they
Sure.
do their table at Tan Fran, that could be a piece of literature that goes out, because I know most people have no clue.
Okay.
And I would hate to penalize them just because we haven't made an effort to educate people. So,
Okay, great. Thank
okay,
you.
thank you.
Okay. Anything else?
Through Chair,
Ken?
I just want to mention, most of the remodeling projects that I do, the requirement, and I believe it's local ordinance, requires an illuminated address.
Yes, that's been a project condition, as I mentioned earlier, for fire
Yeah.
for a number of years. Actually, I have a stamp that says it. We're just remixing the language.
I hate to get back to fire sprinkler ordinance, but I wanted to touch on, you gave some options in the staff report, and I just want to know, you did put in alternative proposal 3, which is to propose a voluntary program and, more of an awareness and, seek out, what the pleasure of the public is, the residents. And has that happened in other jurisdictions? And what's your feeling about that? I mean, I realize you've probably been around when these jurisdictions have transitioned, and what if this vote goes in favor of approving this new ordinance, what is the public's reaction going to be?
Well, obviously, we presented the proposal that we're bringing forward because we feel most adamantly that that's the way that things should happen. I could tell you, just having worked in Millbrae, where they have this exact same ordinance that are already adopted, people generally know what's coming. They know. If you know that if you rip half your house apart, or seating half your house, if you basically gut your house, it's not a surprise to people that they have to do this. I have yet actually to have anybody that wasn't on board with it. As a matter of fact, I think people, I use this example, maybe it's not real appropriate here, but I'm going to use it anyway. We all go to the doctors for our annual physical, and the doctor sends us for a blood test. We don't want to go get a blood test, but we do it because the doctor tells us we're supposed to do it, and we're okay with it when we do it. And this is sort of the same thing. They realize that really the building should be brought up at that time to a certain standard. They just sort of need somebody to kind of push them along with it. That's all. And like I said, it's not something that we've really had. I mean, Dave could speak for it for more years than I can, but it's really something that I've surprisingly not had a lot of resistance to.
Yeah, in the 10 or 12 years that I dealt with all the reconstruction projects, I can't think of one person that complained when they knew, when they did the submittal, that sprinklers were required. Like I said, for the most part, all the houses, the remodels that were dealt with were basically major remodels that were completely, if you close your eyes, this is the analogy I give. If you closed your eyes, walked into the front door and opened them, and you were the layperson, you would say, this is new construction. And what we did was we said, if new construction requires sprinklers, so do these homes. And like I said, there wasn't one complaint in the years that I've been there where sprinklers were required on these particular properties.
And once again, and not to belabor this, I know you have a busy agenda this evening. However, we picked a high number to begin with because we don't want a lot of ambiguity in it. These people realize these homes have major work that is being done in them to begin with. That's why we didn't seek the 50% rule.
Okay. Anything else from staff? Connie?
No, I think we've hashed this through pretty thoroughly.
Right. No, I appreciate all the points. Ken is kind of on the front end of it, designing things, and you guys are on the sometimes the sad end of it, of cleaning things up. So I understand both points. I think it's frankly it's like some of the other things we do here, maybe not too popular but necessary. So that's just my opinion. But any discussion by the council or action?
I'll introduce the ordinance as it stands. Oh, sorry, waive the first reading.
Is there a second?
Second.
Motion second to waive the first reading. All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Okay.
Okay, and I'll introduce the ordinance. Is that what we're doing?
Right, so
All of
there,
them?
if I may.
Yes, please.
I'll just jump in. This is one of those backwards procedures that you're not used to because it's adoption of the codes by reference. So we just want two actions. One of them would be to introduce the ordinances, and then the second action would be to adopt a resolution approving findings of necessity and the need for amendments, deletions, and additions to the code. So two separate actions, introduce the ordinance and then adopt the resolution.
Okay, so I'll introduce the resolution.
The ordinance.
Ordinance.
Yes.
You just said it, went right out of my brain. The ordinance.
Councilmember O'Connell.
Aye.
Councilmember Ibarra.
Aye.
Vice Mayor Medina.
Aye.
Mayor Ruane.
Aye.
Okay, and now you need,
An adoption of the resolution approving the findings of necessity and need for amendments, deletions, and additions to the code.
what you just said. I move to adopt the resolution. Or no?
Yes, that's correct.
Okay.
Councilmember O'Connell.
Aye.
Councilmember Ibarra.
No.
Vice Mayor Medina.
No.
Mayor Ruane.
Aye. Okay.
Oh, I have one more question. I'm sorry. It has nothing to do with this really. But Dave, with the water use reduction changing out the shower heads and all those types of things. Are we still offering the low flush toilet rebates? Are those still available? Do you know? Or Clara, somebody, I know somebody knows.
Yes, we are.
Okay, great. So I believe Lowe's has the advertisements, and I think they're still on our website, or it's on somebody's website, but there are rebates. So if you have to change out your toilet for a low flush toilet, you can get, I think it's up to $75. So it's a really good deal, and you save a lot of money on water.
Through the chair.
Rico? No, go ahead.
I just wanted to say, at this point, obviously, I voted no. I do want to say a few things. I want to compliment Mr. Allen on your presentation, your information, your knowledge, and your heartfelt passion on this, and the same to the Deputy Chief. At this point, in my mind, I'm torn between heart and, shall we say, the heart and the mind. So that's why the no vote. However, it is not to say that when this is readdressed, or we have our fifth colleague here, that at that time I may not have a reconsideration or have gathered a little more clarity for me that will make a solid decision.
So, Mr. Mayor, if I may, I just wanted to clarify the effect of the City Council's 2-2 vote on adopting the resolution. That means that there were not sufficient votes for that resolution to pass, and so there you do have a number of options. One of the options Mr. Woldring is going to explain to you right now. The other option, if you don't want to do those things tonight, is to bring back that resolution at the next meeting for review when there's an additional council member, and then also at that time we would bring back adoption of the ordinances they're having already been introduced tonight.
All right. David?
So alternatives for you to consider include, there are a number of local amendments that are being proposed for your consideration tonight. So an option for you is perhaps to remove one or more of those local amendments and then go forward and vote again on the resolution. So that may be one option. Another would be to modify the language, would be yet another option. It seems as though a couple of the council members may have concerns about a particular local amendment. So one possibility would be to, tonight, set that proposed amendment aside and then go forward and vote on the resolution without that particular local amendment.
Council members that voted no, do you agree with that?
I would agree to go with that recommendation. Pull the fire sprinklers. Let's go forward with the remainder of it. Bring that back at a future date when we have 5 colleagues.
So if I may, just to clarify, Mr. Mayor, the result of that action would then be to foreclose the City Council's review of these with a full 5-member council at the next meeting.
Okay.
Well, my understanding is that could we do that tonight? Not with 5, not with the fire sprinkler situation, but can we pass all the rest of them?
You could, but then that would require us to bring back at the next meeting
Okay.
a resolution that would adopt a local amendment for further consideration of the fire sprinkler matter.
Okay. I think the fire sprinkler matter is very important and should be addressed by the entire City Council. So let's bring it back.
All right, so then the way things stand right now is that the resolution, I think the way things stand is the resolution has not been adopted unless somebody makes another motion. So given that, then staff would bring back at your next meeting the identical resolution for adoption as well as adoption of the ordinances that have been introduced tonight.
Mm-hmm. Okay, fair enough.
So
Yes.
could I introduce a resolution to approve the amendments except for the fire sprinkler proposal?
You could certainly do that, and
I'm all in favor of all the other amendments
Right.
and the
that would
standard
then
amendments.
preclude the council from voting on or taking action on the fire sprinkler ordinance separately at the next meeting.
I'm not following.
Okay, well, why don't we just bring it back for everybody to?
Very good, understood, thank you.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you.